It is October the 16th, 2012. This is Atlanta, Georgia News and Daily Report. This is Mark Taylor. We're going to cover some probably little known news. We're going to go through it. I've provided you with links to each story in the box below. Make sure you check those out. Visit our website at atlantalivenews.org. That's atlantalivenews.org. Subscribe. You'll be the first ones to get our reports. And be sure to participate, comment, and share your knowledge with us. With knowledge comes responsibility, and we appreciate all the input that we can get. If you know of any stories that you would like for us to carry, just let us know. We don't make the news, we just repeat it once we learn about it. We try to make sure that everybody is aware of things going on. We try to report on those things which are important to those people of Atlanta and Georgia and the nation as a whole. So anyway, pressing right along. States legalizing marijuana violates federal law and could spark a constitutional fight between the federal government and state government. During a phone conference yesterday, former Drug Enforcement Administrator and directors of the Office of National Drug Control Policy sent a clear message to the United States Department of Justice. They stated that even if voters in Washington, Oregon, and Colorado pass the legislation to legalize marijuana use for adults and tax its sale, it still violates federal law. This could spark a constitutional brawl between the states and the federal government. This obviously has placed, and probably was intended to, pressure on Attorney General Eric Holder, who in light of the upcoming election has remained silent on the matter. A very interesting statement was made during that phone conference. Peter Bensinger, the moderator of the conference call, who happened to be, in the past, the administrator of the DEA under Ford, Carter, and Reagan, stated, and I quote, "Federal law, the United States Constitution, and Supreme Court decisions say that this cannot be done because federal law preempts state law." That is a pretty bold statement. The links to the story are below. There's much more. Make sure that you read and become aware of what's going on there. Federal authorities are investigating over 1,900 cases of mishandling stimulus money. With very short notice, various IGs or inspector generals from many federal government agencies are putting together both criminal and civil cases in regard to wrongful spending of stimulus money, wasted stimulus money, and outright fraud. The alleged $840 billion in stimulus money, as you all remember from back in 2007, was doled out to jumpstart the faltering economy and to soften the shock waves of the housing bubble, and mostly to create jobs. It is being said that the stimulus money that was wrongfully spent, wasted, or defrauded caused the intended effects of the stimulus to be greatly reduced. And I think that's an understatement. The investigators have already put together around 600 convictions and or judgments against individuals and companies alike that have been accused of fraud and misuse. In addition, there are more than 1,900 investigations ongoing which have yet to secure convictions or have cases brought against them. I suppose 3 years later is better than nothing. I wonder if they're going to do the same thing in regard to the $90 billion that Obama gave to green energy, where companies received millions, tens of millions of dollars, only to a few weeks later go bankrupt. I wonder if that same justice will be doled out then, or will we wait another 2, 3, 4 years before we implement any sort of investigation on that? Stocks, gold, and oil all are down as a result of QE3, quantitative easing, as announced by the Federal Reserve, $40 billion a month indefinitely. The fall in the price of gold Monday has sent the precious metals to its lowest level since September the 12th, the day before the Fed launched QE3, a seemingly indefinite round of stimulus. Gold dropped $16.50 an ounce on Monday to $1,738, a 0.7% decline since the announcement of QE3 by the Fed. Many commodities have fallen in price over the last month, causing many to speculate that perhaps the market has already discounted the actions by the Federal Reserve. QE3, upon its announcement, was already begging, or the market rather, was already begging for good news prior to the announcement, as opposed to the constant negative and disappointing economic news. Until this point, it had been thought that the stimulus was good for investments, even though it had had little effect on unemployment and the growth of the economy. Investors have become hooked on the monetary easing by the Feds, as it has, as stated, been good for investments up until this point. This time, the Federal Reserve's announcement was disappointing, with commodities already up significantly. Oil fell 6.6%. The 10-year Treasury bond yield dropped to 1.67 from 1.76, and as you well know, as bond yields drop, prices go up. As well, the story is below with links. This is a little interesting. Of all countries, in preparations for potential Eurozone fallout, Switzerland prepares her army. With protests against cut benefits and entitlements, civil unrest has broken out in the streets of Athens, Greece, and Madrid, Spain. As a precaution, oddly, the country, well known for her neutrality, is taking very unusual precautions. In September, Switzerland launched Stabilo 2, a military exercise to ready the country to deal with the current turmoil, as well as to test the readiness of its army. Switzerland is not a member of the European Union, nor does it share the euro. Swiss newspaper, the Der Sonntag, Switzerland's newspaper, recently reported that the military exercise centered around a scenario created in 2010 where Army staff identified a potential threat of internal unrest between opposing factions, as well as the potential for dealing with refugees from Portugal, Greece, Italy, Spain, and France. So that doesn't really send good signals as to what's going on in the European Union and their financial situation. Swiss Ministry of Defense told CNBC that it has not ruled out the possibility of having to deploy troops in the coming years. It has also not been ruled out that there could be violence as a result of the financial crisis in Switzerland itself. They are preparing for any situation whereas the police cannot contain or handle the situation and request the assistance of the military. Again, the link is in the box below. Just when you felt your privacy had been invaded, along come fusion centers. They pop up on the scene, and at your expense, a great expense. Around $1.4 billion has been spent by the government since 2003 to design and bring online threat fusion centers under the banner of fighting terrorism. With state-of-the-art systems and a hefty budget, according to reports from a 2-year bipartisan Senate study that was recently released, the fusion centers, who operate under the Department of Homeland Security, has not yielded one shred of useful information to aid in the fight against terrorism. Many folks who rely on mainstream media for their news probably have never heard of fusion centers. Many of you have, many of you may not have. But there are roughly 72 fusion centers altogether. The Bush administration set up around 50 state-based fusion centers and around 22 urban-based fusion centers. The facilities have extremely large data storage capabilities, which collect data intelligence for and from all 16 known intelligence agencies, as well as for privately owned corporations and organizations. This information is made up of cell phone data and email data of every American citizen out. And if you will look in the links below in the box, I have provided you with an interactive map of the location of these fusion centers. The fusion center databases are supposed to be a central storage area of known and suspected terrorists. The idea is to have local law enforcement as well as Homeland Security conduct surveillance and then write up reports known as Homeland Intelligence Reports, or HIRs. If found to be credible, the Department of Homeland Security would then disperse this information to all other affected intelligence agencies. Again, to date, the fusion centers have yet to come up with anything of value to the intelligence community. The Senate report, which also I've given you a link to, reveals that they had, in fact, the fusion centers had spent money, just wasted money in many different areas. For example, they spent money on buttons like you see on a shirt. They were actually hidden cameras, high-dollar SUVs that they claim were for nuclear response and things like that. It revealed that they had not revealed a single bit of helpful information in regard to terrorists, but had only gathered ordinary criminal investigation material that local law enforcement is more than capable of handling. The Department of Homeland Security itself stated that the fusion centers had only produced, and I quote, predominantly useless information and a bunch of crap. And that comes from the Department of Homeland Security. In the Senate report, there are some interesting details. A Department of Homeland Security intelligence officer filed a draft report about a citizen who appeared at a Muslim organization to deliver a day-long motivational talk and a lecture on positive parenting. An intelligence officer decided to report on two men who were fishing at the U.S.-Mexican border. A reviewer commented, "I think that this should never have been nominated for production nor passed through 3 reviews." A report was submitted on a motorcycle group for passing out leaflets informing members of their legal rights. A member commented, "The advice given to the group's members is protected by the First Amendment." The ACLU weighed in on it, and they had filed a lawsuit against the FBI, the Department of Justice, and National Security Agency regarding the fusion centers. The Department of Homeland Security analysts at a Wisconsin fusion center prepared a report about protesters on both sides of the abortion debate, despite the fact that no violence had occurred. A Texas fusion center released an intelligence bulletin that described a purported conspiracy between Muslim civil rights organizations, lobbying groups, the anti-war movement, a former U.S. Congresswoman, the U.S. Treasury Department, and hip-hop bands to spread Sharia law in the United States. The same month, but on the other side of the political spectrum, a Missouri fusion center released a report on the modern militia movement. They claim militia members are usually supporters of third-party presidential candidates like Ron Paul and Bob Barr. In March 2008, going back a few years, the Virginia Fusion Center issued a terrorism threat assessment that described the state's universities and colleges as nodes for radicalization and characterized the diversity surrounding a Virginia military base in the state's historically black colleges as possible threats. An entire section of the Senate report is dedicated to the Privacy Act and its violations and the collection of information completely unrelated to any criminal or terrorist activity that was shown in the Homeland incident report. The Senate report and the activity of the Fusion Center makes it clear that these facilities, regardless of what their intent was intended to be, they have for the most part spied on American citizens, invading their privacy while doing nothing to stop terrorism. And I'm sure that many of you are not surprised, and many of you are well aware of the fusion centers, but to some it may come a surprise that they actually exist. There's maps showing where they are and links that will give you more details on the story in the box below. And we've got an upcoming event that I'm sure none of you want to miss. Millions to participate in FEMA drill next week. There will be a FEMA drill next week on October the 18th at 10:18. More than 1 million people across 5 states and districts of Columbia are scheduled to take part in the first ever Great Southeast Shakeout. The Shakeout is a regional earthquake drill in which participants simultaneously practice the recommended actions during an earthquake. This action is known as drop and cover and hold on, which means drop to the ground, take cover by getting under a sturdy desk or a table, and hold on until it stops shaking. I probably put music to that. It kind of reminds me of back in the old Cold War days when we were kids in school. And last but not least, President Obama and his executive orders. We have another one that's been issued. It was issued on October the 9th, a few days ago. And this one allows, we've had executive orders that's allowed them to take over communications, resources, food, vehicles, homes. Now we finally got an executive order that allows seizure of American bank accounts. This was issued on October the 9th. And it gives the government the power to freeze all bank accounts and stop any related financial transactions that a sanctioned person may own or try to perform, all in the name of Iran sanctions. Titled, an executive order from the President regarding authorizing the implementation of certain sanctions. The order states that if a person is declared by the President, the Secretary of State, or the Secretary of the Treasury to be a sanctioned person, he or she will be unable to obtain access to his accounts, will be unable to process any loans or to make them, or move them to any other financial institution inside or outside the United States. In other words, assets are frozen. The executive order expands this authority by making the person unable to use any third party, such as a partnership association, trust, joint venture, corporation, subgroup, or any other organization that might wish to help him or allow him to obtain access to his funds. And if the individual that is sanctioned decides that the ruling is unfair, guess what? He cannot sue. It's all very legal. The executive order says the President has his vested authority to issue it, and then references endless previous executive orders, including one dating back to 1995. And I know many of us have heard talk that various presidents in the past, through executive order, have issued or put the country under national emergency. And many said that that would come back to haunt us one day because it was never lifted. And many said, no, that won't ever happen. Well, it has happened. And let me start back. Obama referenced many executive orders in the past, one dating back to 1995, which declared a state of emergency, which hasn't been lifted. Executive Order 12957 by Bill Clinton. And everyone has said, as I just said, that the state of emergencies, which had in the past failed to be lifted, would never be used against us. Well, it's come back to haunt us because it's referenced, and that is one of his justifications, empowering him, among many other things, in this executive order. One thing about it, Obama is very clear in his executive orders, and he does his homework. Again, thank you for watching. Make sure you take a look at the links below. Check out the stories. I just give you a brief overview of these stories, and I'll leave the links there for you to further investigate and research. And again, check out our website at atlantalivenews.org. This is Mark Taylor, and we will see you tomorrow. Be safe.